to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a licensed acupuncturist, book author, empowering people to achieve peak performance and improve health through applied kinesiology. No other than Mr. Derek Williams. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Derek. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. My name's Derek Williams. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. I've been a licensed acupuncturist since 2008, and I went to acupuncture school. I started out like a sickly little kid. Started working out in middle school because I was getting bullied. I ended up actually being very athletic. I was competing in sports. I was competing in karate and powerlifting. Later on in bodybuilding, I also competed in wrestling, and I was doing well. In my late teen years and my early 20s, I ended up having an accident, a sports accident. I tried out for professional wrestling, got dropped on my head in an in-ring accident, almost broke my neck. I subsequently also developed fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, multiple chemical sensitivity. I was around the same time as I had the in-ring accident. That was something I was doing on the weekends and in the evenings. And I also was exposed to some chemicals, some pretty bad chemicals in the workplace. And I got really sick. And so I ended up trying to going to doctors, trying to get some help. And I did not really get help at all. I mean, they didn't know what to do with me. You go to a doctor, and doctors are generally pretty good for treating simple things. If you've got one or two things wrong with you, maybe three or four, you know what I mean? If you've got high blood pressure, diabetes, or something like that, that's easily identifiable, easily treatable with drugs, whatever, they can treat you. But if you've got 20 different things wrong with you, if you've got multiple chemical sensitivity, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, if you've got a bunch of this stuff going on that is very difficult to understand, they don't understand it. They don't have time for it. um, there are not a lot of studies, not enough studies done on it. There's not enough protocols for it. Um, and back when I got sick, there was even less. I mean, they're starting to catch up now. They're starting to get, kind of do a lot of studies on it now. But back when I got sick in 2001, there was nothing. I mean, and the internet was still in kind of its fledgling stages, and information was very, very difficult to come by at that time. You know, so I ended up going back to acupuncture school and becoming a licensed acupuncturist. And I took private courses in applied kinesiology to learn as much as I could. And I read every book I could read on applied kinesiology. I've got a bookshelf over here, like one whole shelf of nothing but applied kinesiology books, you know. And I took plenty of courses, private courses in applied kinesiology while I was in acupuncture school. And by the time I graduated from acupuncture school, I was pretty good at it. And later I started having a lot, well, even then I was having a lot of success with it. So I ended up writing these two books. I wrote First thing I wrote was Turn on the Power: How to Use Applied Kinesiology to Improve Athletic Performance. The second one is Successful Treatment of Environmental Illness with Applied Kinesiology, a comprehensive guide for doctors and patients.
Mr. Derek Williams, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about successful treatment of environmental illness with applied kinesiology. Tell us, can you explain how applied kinesiology is used as a diagnostic tool for environmental illness in your book?
Well, okay, so you can tell through applied kinesiology the condition of the acupuncture meridians, the organs, the muscles, the levels of the spine, pretty much everything. You can find if someone has things like, say, parasites or viruses or things like that. Any kind of pathogens, and you can find out which remedies will successfully treat these. You know, just based on it's basically applied kinesiology is basically a binary system. A muscle is either strong or it's weak. If it's strong, it's called facilitated. If it's weak, it's called inhibited. And it's a binary system, just like computers with the zeros and ones. It's either strong or weak. And from a scientific perspective, that would be there's like five levels, like great five grades, like six actually, 0 through 5 of muscle function. So a grade 5 muscle is full functionality, full strength, uh, against resistance and with or without gravity. Grade 4 is partial strength. It's strong, but when you put resistance to it, it goes weak. So you're looking at as far as like where the books that the physical therapists and chiropractors would use, it would say like it's called a muscle grading scale. It would be a difference between a 5 and a 4. Anything below a 4, like a 3, 2, or 3, 2, 1, or 0, is pretty much gross dysfunction that you're gonna have to have an MRI or a CT scan or something, because there's probably a torn muscle or a nerve lesion or something else going on more serious. So applied kinesiology is checking the subtle differences between the grade 5 and a grade 4 on the muscle grading scale.
How does your book define environmental illness and what are its most common manifestations?
Well, it's being made ill by something in your environment. And a lot of people, most people get sick from getting exposed to chemicals. Most people get sick from that. In my case, it was partially from that, but I think it took the head injury first. You know, I had traumatic brain injury. I got dropped on my head in a wrestling ring. And after that, I mean, I was around pretty bad chemicals at work, but not, it wasn't causing me any problems that I could tell. But after I got dropped on my head, then I started having all the problems. And what happens is when you get exposed to these chemicals, and at some point it's just more than your body can deal with, you know, and lots of things start going wrong. I mean, I'm talking about more than just one or two things. I'm talking about it hits you all at once. In my particular case, I had I started just feeling bad. I wasn't sleeping well anymore. I didn't have that much energy. I noticed that my body temperature was low. Your body temperature is supposed to be 98.6. My body temperature was down in the 96s and low 97s. I stayed cold all the time. If I would leave work and go out to my car, and it was summertime, you get in the car and the first thing you want to do is turn on the AC because it's too hot, right? Well, I would
Yeah.
sit in the car and it felt like a sauna, and it actually felt pretty good for a couple minutes. I would just sit there for a couple minutes before I turned on my AC because, just to warm my body back up. And I thought, well, that's weird. I never felt like that before. And I started having less and less energy and started, relying on coffee to get up in the morning and melatonin to put me to sleep at night. And I was like, something's just not right. And I didn't really know. I hadn't gone back to school yet. I wasn't a healthcare practitioner at that time, and I kept getting sicker and sicker. And finally, I was working in a place that had black mold and also really strong electromagnetic fields. It was a printing company, and I was working in the accounting department doing payroll, job billing, inventory, and there was black mold in my office, and there was a big server room behind me, and this server room had all the computer server equipment for the whole company. And plus, we had the old fashioned CRT computer screens, not the flat screens like we have now. The CRTs put out electromagnetic radiation. And every week at work, I was starting to feel like a little more tired, a little worse, a little worse. And Friday, I would get off from work and I'd be off Saturday and Sunday. I'd feel a little better on Saturday and Sunday. And then I'd go back in on Monday, and it was like my battery got recharged a bit over the weekend, but then it would just die down over the week. And one day, I went out to eat, and I oh man, this is pretty bad. I went out to eat, and I came back from eating, and I took a peppermint lifesavers breath mint, popped it in my mouth to try and freshen my breath, after eating. And I got dizzy, I got lightheaded, I felt like I was going to fall over. I felt all kinds of weird sensations in my body. It felt like I had bugs in my head crawling around in my hair, and just really strange, weird things going on. I thought, wow, this is just what is this? And I mean, I started worrying that maybe the breath mint I ate might have been poisoned or something, but they were individually wrapped, and they're in a bag, and the bag was sealed when I opened it. The Each little breath mint was individually wrapped and sealed, so I didn't think there's any way this thing could be poisoned. I didn't know what was going on. So anyway, the next day I ate another one, and that one, the left side of my face went numb, my left arm went numb from the elbow down, and my left leg went numb from the knee down. And I started feeling like I was having like stroke symptoms, and I got really worried. And I was sick for several hours, and then all at once I started becoming allergic to everything. I mean, just everything I ate, I would become allergic to. And then I started like every time I ate, I projectile vomited, and I would have really bad diarrhea at the same time. Projectile vomiting and diarrhea at the same time. Everything I ate, everything. And I went to a chiropractor, and this guy, he was really good at applied kinesiology. A few people on the internet said he was good. And what happened? It was wild. He spent about 30 minutes with me. I'd already been to half a dozen physicians that didn't help me at all. Took a lot of my money, that weren't able to do anything for me. This guy did muscle testing, applied kinesiology, and he found some things that were wrong with me, corrected them. I was able to go home. I felt better immediately, pretty much. And I went home. I was able to eat, drink, whatever, and I felt okay. And later I ended up becoming sick again shortly after that. And that's when I had to, I mean, it was a long story and took a long time. But basically, that gave me some serious relief. And it was the first thing and only thing that gave me any relief. So I started studying it. I was fascinated by it.
Mr. Derek, how does your book address the skepticism around applied kinesiology given its classification as a pseudoscience by organizations like the American Cancer Society?
Well, they they call it a pseudoscience, but there really have never been any good studies done on it. The studies they've done are of terrible quality, and they're very few. And it's used in mostly a chiropractic setting. There are some acupuncturists like me that use it, but mostly it's the realm of chiropractors. And the thing is we find that it works in our clinics. We find that it works, and it works tremendously well, but it's not the kind of thing that lends itself to the traditional type of placebo controlled studies like drug companies do on drugs. And I'll give you an example of that. Like, one of the studies they did, and they tried to use this to invalidate it. They put like a device between the practitioner's hand and the patient's arm. And when you've got the patient's got their arm out like this, and somebody's muscle testing, and you muscle test a lot of things besides just the straight arm test. That's just one that people use for convenience sake for a lot of things. But you can muscle test any muscle in the body. And what they did, they put a device in between the practitioner's hand and the patient's arm to like regulate the amount of pressure that was used. You can't do that. You can't do that because every practitioner is of a different strength level, and every patient is of a different strength level. I mean, I'll give you an example. The Probably the smallest, weakest person I've ever muscle tested was a 5-year-old little girl. I had to muscle test a 5-year-old little girl one time, and you used just a teeny tiny bit of pressure on her. And the strongest person I've ever muscle tested was a 5-time world champion powerlifter in a 275-pound weight class, and he had a 700-pound bench press and 1,000-pound squat. This guy's a beast. I had to use quite a bit of force to muscle test the guy. And then you've got all different levels in between, and then you've got different practitioners using different amounts of force. So some people might use just a little more force. Some people might use a little less force. As long as it's adequate to do the job, that's what you're looking for. But see, this whole thing about putting a sensor between the patient's arm and the practitioner's hand and only allowing, 15 pounds of force, and that's it. You press down on it and only 15 pounds of force is transmitted to the person's arm. That's not a good test. And the other ones that I've seen in other words, I think a lot of these tests, a lot of these studies have been set up to invalidate it because it's alternative medicine. You know.
Mr. Derek,
Yeah.
can you share a case study from a book where applied kinesiology successfully treated a patient with an environmental illness?
Yes. Yes. The first person I ever treated with it, she had environmental illness, and she had her biggest problem was candida. She had candida, and which is Candida albicans. It's a yeast. You know, it's a fungus yeast that gets in your intestines. It can get systemic, and it on her it had gone systemic, and she was allergic to everything. And this lady, she was mainly allergic to the smells in her office, and she was a. I'm trying to remember if she was a nurse or she was. I think she was a respiratory therapist. And this lady came to my office, and she had actually gone to her supervisor before that, and she had gone through the whole thing, like a year and a half of, or maybe 2 years even of going to the going through the court system, going to doctors and everything, getting certified for disability. And after I treated her, she said she felt a lot better. She went back to work the next day, and she was going to talk to her supervisor about her disability case and quitting work and everything, get on disability. Well, the funny thing was, she didn't. The smells at the hospital didn't bother her anymore. And she said, "Wait a minute, I'm not even smelling any smells anymore. Why don't you let me work today and tomorrow and see if I can do it?" And he did, and she worked those 2 shifts, and she was fine. And she said, "No, I'm not going to go disability. I'm gonna keep working. Apparently, I'm better." And she was completely cured in one treatment. Now that's rare. I'm just going to be honest with you. That doesn't normally happen. Most people improve dramatically, but most people don't get completely well in one treatment. But it does happen. Um, I think the biggest part of this right here, and I think this is kind of getting off the question that you asked, but I think the biggest benefit to using the applied kinesiology approach to treating these problems is, if you look in my book, you'll see, there are 40, 50 different things you can muscle test during the treatment, right? You could
Yeah.
correct potentially every single one of those. Somebody out of say 40 things, somebody's going to have half of them wrong, maybe 20, maybe 30 of them wrong with them. Okay? When you go to a regular medical doctor, you're only going to get treated for one or two things. That's all they want to spend time on. With this, you can address 20, 30, 40 things that are wrong with somebody. And you can imagine how much better they're going to feel if you're able to address all those things.
Mr. Derek, as a licensed acupuncturist and book author, what are your short term and long term goals?
Short-term goals, I'm just basically working on getting the word out about these treatments right here. That's, well, short term and long term. I mean, that's pretty much it. And another thing is, keep on doing the research. I want to keep doing the research, the things that I find, reporting on those, put them in a future edition of the book. If I find enough things to make it worth it to write a new edition, I'll write another edition.
And good luck to your goals, Mr. Derek, and looking forward for more and more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a licensed acupuncturist as well as an author?
Wow. I would say you definitely need to be an expert in your field. You need to have something that is worth contributing as far as writing a book. You need to stand out in a way. You can't just be the average licensed acupuncturist. Like in my case, I've made a lot of discoveries. I've made many, many discoveries in applied kinesiology that are in my books. And applied kinesiology is kind of my niche. With acupuncture itself, there, I mean, the Chinese, it started in China, and the Chinese have done such a wonderful job. They've written so many good books on acupuncture, and other people have too. There are a couple of guys from Great Britain, that have written excellent books on acupuncture, and these are the preeminent experts. And I don't think anybody coming out of acupuncture school is gonna be able to top that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And here I'm coming from an acupuncture background, doing applied kinesiology. So it's a different thing. It's a niche, It's a it's kind of a different thing because most acupuncturists doing applied kinesiology, they're they're not quite at that level. You know what I mean? They're not at the level where they're going to be writing books about it. You know what I mean?
Yes, and thank you so much for your advice, Mr. Derek. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
That influenced my journey. Oh wow. Well, I tell you, I was trained originally by a guy named Steve Rocklitz. He was a PhD in physics. He's passed away now. But he has written several really, really good books. And he was the one that taught me about the applied kinesiology um, for using it for environmental illness patients. And that's who I originally learned from. Then I got to study under Dr. Sheldon Deal. But Dr. Rocklitz had some good, and Dr. Sheldon Deal is one of what they call he was one of the original 12 guys that discovered the science of applied kinesiology. But as far as books that you ask about for applied kinesiology, um, if you're going to learn it for athletic potential, my book, um, Turn on the Power: How to Use Applied Kinesiology to Improve Athletic Performance. I would recommend my book. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier than the ones for the chiropractors. Like the Applied Kinesiology synopsis is really great, but it's really, really technical, and you pretty much need to be a doctor to be able to read it and understand it. Turn on the Power. I wrote it for lay persons and doctors. Successful Treatment. I also wrote for lay persons and doctors, and that's what I'm kind of trying to do now. If you're a lay person, I would say the best applied kinesiology book to read for overall applied kinesiology, just learning how to do it for overall health, would be Touch for Health, and that's by Dr. John Thie. He was also a chiropractor, but he wrote that for laypersons. And I would say the Touch for Health book would be a great place to start.
Thank you for that recommended book, Mr. Derek. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast law 101 and mental health 101 love letters in its fourth season, as well as my movie 101 review and music 101, science 101 and sex 101 in its fourth season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Derek, what is the one key takeaway you hope readers, doctors, and patients alike gain from successful treatment of environmental illness with applied kinesiology?
I would say the takeaway is that this is the only system that I know that allows you to use any other thing that you know how to do. Like most practitioners, I would say, and I kind of hate to use this term, but you know what a one trick pony? You ever heard the saying one trick pony?
Yes,
Most
sir.
people that were treating environmental illness before I came along were what I would call one trick ponies. We had a lady who was doing a certain type of acupuncture. It was always the same treatment all the time. We had this guy that came up with a supplement. It helps, and her treatment does help a few people, but it doesn't help most people. This other guy had a supplement and it helped him. He was really, really sick. He owns a supplement company. He developed the supplement. He took it and he got better. He got well from taking his supplement. There's another lady out there that has a different type of thing that she does, and it's with neuroplasticity. I'm sure you've heard of neuroplasticity, and that's her whole thing. And a few people that do it get well, but the vast majority of people who do it do not, because I've talked to them online, and this is like a one time, like a one technique, one thing. With my system, you can use any technique within the system. You muscle test, you find out what's wrong with the body, then you ask the body what it needs. If it needs one technique or another technique or another technique or this supplement or that supplement or whatever, or even a chiropractic adjustment or you need a needle and an acupuncture point or a couple of acupuncture points, it'll tell you. Your body will tell you what you need, and you can do that. You can do any of it. You can use any of their systems within my system, and this is the only system that I know of that allows you to use anything you know within the system, you know, and not
Miss,
just one thing. Anyway,
yes, Mr. Derek Williams, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your books, or any projects that you're doing right now?
sure. If you would go to my website, it's derek-williams-author.com. That is where my derek-williams-author.com is my website, and that's where all my books are. And it can take you. The links will take you to be able to get a hold of my books.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Derek Williams because if you support him, for sure, more and more and more empowering advocacy to come, more and more empowering books to come. So, Mr. Derek, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
More to come, people. See you soon.